To say that the N64 had a profound impact on my childhood would be like the understatement of the century. It is by far my favorite console, most likely due to nostalgia because it's the first console I ever got. In 1998, I was 8 years old and I remember, that fateful morning opening my N64. It wasn't quite like those N64 kids, but still pretty epic and a pretty memorable moment, in my childhood. Um, so was a video that was requested of me, to make a list of my top N64 games. Now, it would probably be easier to do a top 10 because there's just so many good games on this console, so many memorable games that were just childhood defining experiences. Um, but I wanted to narrow it down to a top five, and that was really hard. Because there's going to definitely be some games that I omit that people are not going to agree with. And before you get out your nails, and your crucifix, just know that this list is entirely subjective, and I made it based on what was most memorable, what I spent the most time on, and what I just enjoyed the most. When I was a kid, that first playthrough. Some of these games that I spent hours and hours upon as a child. So it's a bit of a subjective list, not to be taken too seriously, but this is more just me reflecting on my childhood and what I really enjoyed. When the N64 was new and I had a couple of these games. So without further ado, this is my personal top five Nintendo 64 games. The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time is not on my top five, and neither is Majora's Mask, actually. So, two games that you're probably expecting to see on this list, you're not going to see them. Well, I do have to give them honorable mentions. I spent hours on both of these games as a kid, and let me just tell you, like they really took, the 3D adventuring, really to new heights. The only reason I'm not putting them on the top five is just because the five that I put ahead of them are just so good that they actually overshadow amazing games like Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. And of the two, I actually enjoyed Majora's Mask a little more. While it is the shorter game, I just thought that what the content in it was more fleshed out, and the dungeons were a little better laid out. It was more of a quality over quantity approach. So that's why. But yeah, these two are not on my top five, but I think that they definitely deserve honorable mention. Okay, starting us off with number five, I've got Star Fox 64. This game was such a classic. Okay, this was one of those again, just childhood defining games because up to this point, there'd really been nothing like it. There was the original Star Fox on the Super Nintendo, which was one of the first games to fully utilize the Super Nintendo's 3D graphics rendering chip. But to see this come alive on the N64 with full voice acting was just nothing short of amazing. I found the backgrounds in this game to be fully immersive, and the gameplay and the routes you could take, were just so good. And then on top of it, you had unlockable expert mode for replay value. If you got all the medals in the original game, you could unlock expert mode, which you could play the game at a much higher difficulty. So this game is just awesome. And one thing I really got to tout about this game is the music. The music in this game just set the scene for each level so well. Like from the loneliness of space to an arid desert, like the one you see here. Just give this music a listen for a second. I enjoyed Star Fox 64 for hours as a kid. I beat the game, on expert mode. I got all the medals. Would even try to like top my own high scores. But from the memorable cheesy dialogue quotes to the epic music to graphics that were really good for the time, this was a really really excellent game. If you're one of my younger viewers and you've never played this, definitely check it out. It is a great game. And I will move on to number 4. Okay, number 4 on my list is Diddy Kong Racing. Um, and I really have nothing but good things to say about this game. It is one of my all time favorites, and I do believe that it was the definitive racing game of this time period in gaming. And it just took everything that Mario Kart 64 did and just did it better tenfold. I mean, you're talking about from the characters to the environments to the music, everything was just so much more fleshed out. And in addition to just having, karts to race, you had airplanes and hovercrafts as well, which controlled very differently. So it offered you a unique challenge in that regard. Also, it was a little bit of an advertising vehicle because Banjo and Conker had yet to be in their own games, and they appeared, in this game as playable characters. So it was just Rare, setting up for their own characters to have their own games. But during this time, Rare was truly, a top tier game developer, just a cut above the rest in terms of music, graphics, and gameplay. And what I also thought was cool was that this game had a full on story mode with bosses and everything. So it was a racing game with a story mode, which also hadn't really been seen to this point. So I enjoyed this a lot more than Mario Kart 64, which doesn't make this list, unfortunately, but it's still a great game, you know, in its own right. And also in Diddy Kong Racing, you had this hub world you could explore as you collected the gold balloons. You got to explore more of the island, opening up, new worlds. So I thought that was pretty cool too. I gotta really talk about the music in this game, composed by David Wise, the man who was responsible for the Donkey Kong Country soundtrack on the Super Nintendo. The music in this game is just amazing. Letting you listen to a couple of tracks here, like with Star Fox, wouldn't even really do it justice. Just play the game, and you'll see how everything just fits so well, and every track is just an absolute banger. David Weiss is one of my favorite composers from this era, and his work on the Rare games just really was truly incredible. One thing I really loved about this game when I was a kid was the outer space levels. When I was a kid, I loved anything to do with aliens and outer space. If anyone remembers the show on Nickelodeon, The Journey of Alan Strange, I was there for all that. So seeing these levels and just how well David Wise's music fit the world that you were in and the colors and everything, it was just awesome. Just one of my favorite things. I thought this was so cool, and I've streamed Diddy Kong Racing on my channel before. I just think it's an awesome racing game from this time period, and Rare did an amazing job. Number 3 on the list, Super Smash Brothers. Now, this game was truly definitive for its time, okay? And I have to say that this was just in a time where fighting games, had preset combos that came down to rote memorization. This really changed up the way fighting games were played, and it was so cool to see, all your favorite Nintendo characters in the same game able to compete against each other. I always played as Yoshi, even though he's a lower tier character, but it was still cool to get to get to beat up your friends with your favorite character. Again, the graphics and the music were really nothing too special in this game, but by far this was my favorite multiplayer game on the Nintendo 64. And the cool part was, back when we were kids, we always played with items and just crazy things would on crazy stages and crazy things would happen. But what's cool is this game got such a competitive scene. You know, and people turned off items, and it actually it's a very technical game, not like Melee on the GameCube, which is an extremely technical game, but this really just laid the foundation for what a Super Smash Brothers game is. And while yeah, it's not it's not an amazing single player experience. I had to put this on this list just because me and my friends had so much fun with this game, with the multiplayer as kids, that it definitely deserves a place on the list. And as far as multiplayer goes, it's my number one favorite on the console. Number two on my list would need to be Conker's Bad Fur Day. And oh, what a game this was from a technological aspect and an innovation aspect in terms of story mode. This was a mature game that was a parody of platformers. And keep in mind, this was not your typical children's game, although it looked like one. You can just see from the language being used here that this was not a game intended for children. Now, what Rare wanted to do was make a game that kind of parodied the typical platformer genre. What they did was they created a masterpiece, graphically for the time. The humor was just hilarious in this game. Rare was a British company, so it had that, kind of dark British humor in there. And I've done a review of this game. I really don't think that this game could be made today just because there were some jokes in this. There were actually jokes about suicide in this game, okay? I mean, like this game kind of really pushed the envelope, and this game goes for about $100 on eBay, the original cartridge, because there weren't that many out there. Apparently, what had happened was a bunch of children saw a game about a cute little squirrel, and bought it for their kids, and then saw what they got. They got a squirrel bouncing around on a sunflower's tits, and cursing every 2 seconds. So they took it away. So the game was kind of like frowned upon. So there weren't that many out there. So it goes for a pretty penny on eBay these days. I got this game for $9 in a thrift store, and they didn't know what rated M meant, so they were able to sell it to me. And I remember I went to like GameStop, and they told my dad not to get it for me because it was a mature game, so he said no. But I found it in a thrift store, and man, I played this game came out in 2001, and I think I played this in like 2005. And this was around the time that, like Drawn Together was on TV, the Sarah Silverman program, and I think it just fit perfectly in with that kind of sense of humor. This is really the only game that really falls under like the genre of comedy, I would say, to this day, and with great gameplay. Like there was really just nothing like it. It felt like playing an episode of like Family Guy or something, but you could interact with it. So look at this here. One of the bosses is no joke, a giant poop monster. That's right. You actually fight an opera singing piece of shit in this game. How awesome is that? And the great this game was actually remade on Xbox, and the great irony is that they actually censored out a lot of the cursing in the Xbox version, which is funny because Nintendo was always known for being kind of like a more kid-friendly, console. But yeah, this game pulled no punches, and it is by far, one of my favorites. The music was great. Chris Seaver basically did almost entirely all the voices on his own in this game. Doing some awesome voice acting. Robin Beanland composed a great soundtrack, and it was a fun fact. It was actually the first game to not have distance fog, meaning that like the objects in the background were fully rendered, and you didn't have to get closer for them to be rendered. So it kind of like pushed the N64 to its limits there. So for all those reasons, and just the crazy cutscenes and really funny sense of humor in this game, that earns it number two on my all-time list of favorite N64 games. All right, so it is time to reveal my number one all time favorite N64 game. But before I do that, I figured I'd name a couple of honorable mentions just because, like I said, making this list was really hard. There were so many good games, on the N64, and I didn't have, all of them, but, narrowing it down to five, man, that's just so hard. So, a couple of honorable mentions. that I got to give, which of course are going to be spoilers because if it's an honorable mention, it's not going to be number one. So why don't we just get it out of the way? Number one is not Super Mario 64, but Super Mario 64 was a great game that kind of defined the 3D platforming genre and was a totally new experience for its time. And it was the first game that I got on N64. So definitely have to mention that as an awesome game, one of my childhood favorites, and still very replayable and relevant to this day because there's an avid speedrunning community around it. I also loved Cruis'n USA. I know it wasn't like the most well built game, but again, I loved it. Awesome racing game for the time. You're probably going to disagree with me on this one, but Donkey Kong 64, just a game that I loved as a kid. The music and atmosphere was great. You had all the new Kongs, huge worlds. It did get a little lengthy, and it was a bit of a collectathon. So I understand the criticisms that people have of it. Later in retrospect, but I loved it when I was a kid, and definitely have to give it an honorable mention. And also Mystical Ninja, starring Goemon, which is a lesser known, I guess, game, but an awesome game nonetheless on the N64, and another one that I got to give an honorable mention to. So, that being said, let's talk about my number one favorite Nintendo 64 game. And my number one favorite Nintendo 64 game of all time is Banjo Kazooie. Why Banjo Kazooie and not Super Mario 64? Well, Banjo Kazooie just seemed to take from Super Mario 64 what a platformer is, and again, just it's just rare outdoing Nintendo. Yet once again, um, the moves were just so much more crisper. The graphics and environments so much more fleshed out, and you had a full on storyline. Banjo's little sister Tootie is stolen by the witch Gruntilda, and Banjo and Kazooie have to venture into her lair to get her back. There's actual fleshed out characters, and instead of voice acting, each character has their own little like kind of like grunting noises they make with these little word bubbles as they speak, which was cool. Which kind of like let you use your imagination as to what each character would sound like. The worlds in this game were so well done. From the snow world to the pirate theme Treasure Trove Cove to the witch's lair itself. There's even a level where you go into a haunted mansion, and it's Halloween themed. But by far my favorite level in this game would have to be Rusty Bucket Bay, where you're actually on a ship, like in a cargo yard, and there's so many traps that can kill you. A lot of you who played this game as a kid probably remember the engine room. One of my favorite YouTubers as of late, 444, has been streaming this game. He thought that this level was pretty easy, but I remember as a kid, this giving me a couple of problems. But it's just such a cool environment, for a level. So, and then you had Click Clock Wood, the final level of the game, where you're around this giant tree and you get to see it in spring, winter, and summer. I mean, how cool is that? Like the environment changes, in each passing season, but it's the same map. Just so much creativity around this game, and you have Banjo, who's kind of an even-keeled bear. You have Kazooie, who's a little bit of a like cheeky bird, I guess you could say, who has a little bit of an attitude. But overall, I thought that this game was just looking back on it. It is a masterclass in platforming. It also has Easter eggs to other rare games, like Naughty the Beaver here, who was an enemy in Donkey Kong Country. Just so cool. Um, and the game, throws some unique challenges like this little quiz show at the end where you actually have to remember stuff from throughout the game and answer correctly. To pass this level, and it all culminates in the final showdown with Gruntilda the Witch at the top of the tower, which is an honest to god full on boss fight where you have to use pretty much every move that you've learned throughout the game in order to beat the boss. So for these reasons, Banjo Kazooie is my top N64 game. I just think like it was really the perfect platformer, and they made the sequel Banjo-Tooie, which was a great game too, but nothing really like that first time playing it. This game, just hours of my childhood playing this game, and what a game it was. So thanks for watching my video. These are my all-time top favorite N64 games, my top five. Let me know in the comments below if you agree, disagree, anything that should have been ranked higher or lower. And I will see you all in the next video. Bye, everyone.